Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to another exciting episode of Psychology Talks. And today we're going to discuss the neurosciences, that how brain works, how it can help in in enhancing our cognitive abilities. And that's why our guest today is a leading person who is in charge of developing a revolutionary supplement, a natural medicine that aimed at boosting brain health and slowing cognitive decline. Cognitive decline is often linked with dementia and some other brain kind of disorders, I would say. And today we'll just explore more the science behind it, that what causes and how we can slow down. And we are honored to be joined by Dr. Amanda Wiggins. uh, she is a neuroscientist, global business leader with an expertise in innovation, regulation, and commercialization. So, welcome, Amanda. Thank you for joining us. It's such an honor to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and Breen. It's great to be here.
Thank you. You are doing such an impressive work, especially in the field of neuroscience and helping people to, slow the rate of decline in the brain cognitive abilities. So, before we actually get into the discussion, just tell us a bit about your journey, that how you got into this.
Yeah, sure. So I am a real neuroscience nerd at heart. My love of neuroscience started right back when I was in high school, actually, and I was fairly, I guess, somewhat sort of naive and thought that if I studied neuroscience, I could understand the seat of human consciousness when I was younger. You know what it's like when you're a teenager. You've got all these questions about who am I and why do I feel like this? So that was really what spurred on my first sort of interest in neuroscience. I went and did an undergraduate degree at Otago University here in New Zealand, an honours degree. And after that, I headed off to the University of Melbourne in Australia, where I did a PhD in neuroscience. And I followed that up with a postdoc at UCSF in San Francisco. But that's all very academic, and in fact I've been out of the academic world for about 19 years now, and I think that journey for me was really spurred on, I think, by the realization that I'm probably not the world's best researcher. It's not my best skill set going deeper and deeper and deeper into one topic. I actually really enjoy the big strategic picture. So when we moved back to New Zealand, about 19 years ago now, I made the leap into the regulatory space. I was working as a government advisor on sort of biotech regulations. And more recently, about 11 years ago, I made the jump into the business world. So specifically around commercializing science and human health products. And, I think it really came about because I just spent so much time in a lab, sometimes in a dark room, looking down a microscope, counting neurons. I just thought, gosh, I really want to get this science out there to the people where it can make a difference in people's lives. So that's the very short version of where I ended up, where I am today.
Yeah, I mean that's quite fascinating that you have come up with this discovery of this supplementary, which is natural and which enhances the cognitive abilities. Tell us a bit more about it, that what it is and how it slows down this or enhances the cognitive abilities.
Yeah. So I'm the CEO of a company called the CGP Lab that's headquartered here in New Zealand. And we are commercializing a dipeptide molecule called cyclic glycine proline, or CGP for short. So it's made up of essentially two amino acids that will probably be familiar to many of your listeners, glycine and proline. And when they go through a prolonged heat and pressure process, it cyclizes those two amino acids together as a dipeptide. What makes CGP really, really interesting is a couple of things, actually. One, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, so that gives it a huge advantage. And two, it's actually backed by about 30 years of research by our Chief Science Officer, Dr. Jian Guan, whose life's work has been on this molecule, working out how it works and what it does. And there's obviously quite a lot we could talk about there, but in a nutshell, CGP spurs on the repair and growth of the brain's tiny blood vessels, which are called capillaries, that are responsible for delivering oxygen and nutrients to the brain and taking out the cellular waste, the trash. So it's very important to have really healthy, high-functioning capillaries, and that's what CGP helps with.
Oh, wow. That's sounds quite fascinating that how these things work in our brain, and we don't even know that, It's sometimes like I always wonder that how our brain knows what to do, the internal things where we are completely unaware of it. So it's quite fascinating. But as you mentioned that, it helps all this repair of these neurons and then taking the trash out of the brain or because it does not, I think it helps does not, accumulate all the trash in the brain, and it keeps the flow of the trash going, keeping it out. So what actually do you think, what are the causes that restricted, I know that, because our brain is managing everything very naturally, maintaining all the blood flows, taking the trash out or helping it repair. So what do you think it actually restricted in the first place, and how it helps repair?
That's a really big question. So
Yeah.
there's a very strong emerging picture actually around blood flow, and particularly damage to arteries and capillaries that starts to kick off in about the middle part of your life, middle age.
Mm-hmm.
And there's fascinating research around this that points to things like obesity, elevated blood pressure, smoking, diabetes, so elevated blood sugar, all of which can damage capillaries and damage blood flow to the brain. And there's some really interesting in silico modeling actually that shows that that damage starts to kick off around middle age, which is scary to think, right?
Yeah.
And it accumulates over your life and reaches a tipping point somewhere between about 70 and 75. And it's about that point that there's a really big step change in your risk of developing dementia or other neurodegenerative diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way, I like to think of it, it's a bit like your garden hose. If you had a garden hose for 20 or 30 years that you were using constantly, all day, every day, pushing through large volumes of water to water your garden and leaving it in the sun and all these things, that damage would accumulate. The lining of that hose would become damaged and eventually it would break. And it's a similar situation with the vasculature in the brain. So, I think the thing I've been reading about a lot and I'm most interested in is around these so-called modifiable risk factors for dementia, of which there's a lot of really good research, and the Lancet Commission, which is a very reputable organisation, as I'm sure you know, they published their latest update on dementia prevention, care and treatments last year, 2024. And in that study, they identified 14 modifiable risk factors that if you addressed all of these risk factors throughout the course of your life, you could reduce your risk of developing dementia by a huge 45%.
Wow. Wow. So could you tell us a bit more about this, that how they can actually reduce the risk factor? Maybe I know that maybe 14 would not be able to, you may not be able to list all 14, but maybe the key ones that, our audience can actually take care of, that, these are the ones that they need to avoid, or they need to make certain habits to avoid dementia or some other disorders in later life.
Yeah, actually, what's really interesting about that study, and I'd love to share the link with you so your listeners can jump on and have a read, because it's such a great paper. It's these risk factors start right at an early age with early childhood education. So the more Yeah, I know. Really interesting, right? The more education a child has, the
Mhm.
more protected they are from developing dementia later in life. Yeah,
Wow,
and so
that's
that really,
quite fascinating.
yeah, I think so too. And to me, that really points to that whole sort of use it or lose it aspect of the brain. We think about, we think about our bodies. We know that we need to use our muscles, otherwise we could develop sarcopenia or muscle loss later in life.
Mhm.
But perhaps we don't think about our brain like that. And I think we probably should think about our brain like that, because our brains are just these big sort of meaty structures full of neurons that are all billions and billions of neurons that are interconnected. And we can either use those connections, and when we do that, we strengthen them. That's the basis of learning. Or if we don't use them, they atrophy and those connections will die off. And what happens is you can get brain shrinkage later in life. So yeah, really interesting. So the first modifiable risk factor is that sort of early childhood education, and then it moves into that middle life phase, where many of the risk factors are things that are probably not too surprising, lifestyle factors like obesity, smoking, diabetes. There was one really, physical inactivity, which
Mhm.
is an interesting one in this day and age when many of us have desk jobs, so we're
Yeah.
not as active as we should be. Um, and one of the other modifiable risk factors in that middle age band that I found particularly interesting is hearing loss.
Oh, yes, yes. There are a lot of people who actually have developed this in later age. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So hearing loss is associated with a 7% increase in the likelihood of developing dementia later in life. I find that fascinating. So that's something that your listeners can do fairly easily is go and get your hearing checked. And in
Oh,
this day and age, hearing aids are actually very discreet and very small and really good and easy to use. So that's something that everyone can do. The other one that's really, really easy to address is that physical inactivity. So there's heaps of good
yes.
research that shows that even a small amount of physical activity, even 15 minutes a day of brisk
Yeah.
walking, is hugely beneficial for your brain.
Hmm. And that's
And
amazing.
then
Like, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to just finish off that discussion on the Lancet study. They also then looked at risk factors later in life, once someone's through
Mhm.
that middle age, and there were 3 risk factors identified in there. And social isolation was one of the big ones, air pollution, and also vision loss. And so, social isolation can be a real thing for older people. They can lose their ability to get out and about. Sometimes they're not as mobile as they once were. Um, so I guess the message there is, if you have a senior person in your life, take good care of them, connect with them, chat with them, ask
Uh,
them how they are, get them out and about. It's really, really important for their brain health.
Yeah, that's these are really good insights that, although a lot of people, like, I think, get this message over and over again that you do the exercise and avoid like smoking or something, because it's the thing is, like, they can have all these things when they are young. They don't realize that how it's affecting their later life, and it's gonna have some more implications. So these small things, I think, that you mentioned, that, just simple walk. And one thing that you really pointed out really good, that it's social isolation. I think that is a one big dilemma these days. It's not only for the, I think, elderly people, but even nowadays younger people also having this dilemma of social isolation. Although this world is now more, we are in the information age, we are technologically advanced, and we are more connected, but we are disconnected emotionally. We don't know that what the other person is going through, just who is just next to us. So that is one thing that, and we've seen, I've like read some studies also, that how this social isolation leads to, again, not only like depression or the psychological disorders, or psychological problems, but in fact it also indirectly affects the physical level as well. Like, people develop lots of lots of physical ailment just because they are not connected with other human beings. I think we are
Mm.
meant to be connect with the other human beings, so we feel good. It enhances our well-being as well. So yeah, that's a very good thing. I want to ask that, especially when you this have this like groundbreaking supplement which enhances this cognition, what what challenges you faced when you were actually trying to like make this one, or like having some research on this? So what were the challenges you faced during that phase?
Mm. So many challenges.
Yeah.
It's very challenging to get a company up and running off the ground, right? I think, when it comes to brain health, I think that, brain health is protecting your brain health for future prosperity is not something that gets much attention, right? There's
Yes.
a lot out there around exercise and diet, but not a lot specifically around
Mhm.
brain fit, keeping your brain going. So just that kind of, education piece has always been quite difficult. But we also, there's a lot of R&D expenditure that we've put into the company. So developing the manufacturing process, the testing process, identifying the best sources of CGP, developing, brands, and then there's quite a big, steep sort of regulatory aspect as well when it comes to supplements. But yeah, we're through. Don't want to say we're fully through it, but we have got our wonderful CGP Max supplement range on the market now. It's been on the market for about 2.5 years. So we're away. So it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand this, especially like when you start a business, I think, because now you are into this, it's really a difficult to bridge or make a connection between science and the business, because there are kind of systems that you need to follow when you start a business, and that is, I think, a big hurdle which even I face when we start to make this the connection between science and I think we take all these things, especially science, spirituality, psychology, mental health, like take it as a separate, I would say, boxes, and try to deal separately. Whereas this is, I think it's all together linked, and we need to address them as a holistically, rather than taking it as like one thing at a time. So I think that's one
Mhm.
thing, very
Yeah.
big problem
And
we face. Yeah.
And even the way we communicate in science is really quite different to the way we communicate in business or even marketing, say.
Yes.
Anyone who's ever worked in science will know that the way you communicate is sort of like an inverted pyramid, right? You do
Yes.
almost all the background, and then you do your sort of methods, and then you do your conclusion right at the very end. And I did all of this, and this is how I did it, and this is the limitations of the study, and you sort of go into all this detail, and then finally you can put your conclusion in there, right?
Yes.
In business communication, and even more so in marketing,
Yeah.
that pyramid is flipped the right way up. It's like a triangle pointy at the top, where you put the absolute key sentence first and all the background stuff second. So that's something I learned years and years and years ago. I actually did a course on science communication, and it was really, really good. So I try to get my staff and team on board with that. Flip the triangle. Don't do the background first like you would in science. Do the headline first, the bit that's going to
Yeah.
grab people's attention. So yeah, that's just one small challenge, and I'm quite interested in that because, when it comes to science itself, there's always a degree of uncertainty, right? You have a set of principles that you're testing, a hypothesis, and you can hopefully reach a conclusion and either prove or disprove your hypothesis. But there's always limitations to a study. So in some ways, as a scientist, there's never like a single truth, right? There's just an experiment
Yeah.
that showed something.
Yeah.
Whereas I think when it comes to business, it's expected that you speak in a much more definitive way. And so that's been a journey for me, a personal journey. I'm always thinking of what if it's not that? What if it's not that? I mean, you're always thinking of how else could I test that? And there's a leap into being a CEO where it's expected that you can speak definitively and make decisions, even if you don't know everything that you need to know, right? So that's just a personal journey that I've been on.
Yeah, share a bit of a case study, or maybe or any like you have the experience that when your the supplement has worked wonder with people, that how it helped. So I think our audience will know that what exactly does this medicine do with them.
Yeah. So our supplement is really designed for people over the age of 45 who are starting to notice the first sort of effects of brain aging, which can manifest as kind of just general forgetfulness or a bit of brain fog, struggling to find words. I mean, I think we all have a bit of that. The way that CGP works, which is through repairing and growing capillaries, is actually really well characterized in a number of neurological conditions, including Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, and stroke. So we know that the way CGP works, which is through a hormone called IGF-1, is heavily dysregulated in neurological conditions like that. And there's a huge amount of preclinical research, including in vitro and animal studies, and also human observational studies that show higher CGP levels equate to better cognitive outcomes. So back to the question around what kind of feedback do we get? We get feedback, I kind of think of it as in two different tranches. So we get feedback from people who are similar to me, similar to my age group, who say that they just feel like they've had a breath of fresh air or a walk through a forest is something that a customer said to us, because it's oxygenation, right? So you feel more alive and more alert. But we also get a lot of feedback emailed to us from people who have got these quite serious neurological conditions, particularly Parkinson's. We had someone who texted me actually the other day to say they were in hospital and had a stroke and were making an amazing recovery, and they think it's because of the CGP. So yeah, we sort of get feedback. I sort of think of it as people who are going through just normal healthy aging and wanting to look after their brain, who describe it, their experience with CGP Max as feeling more energized and alive and less brain fog and less forgetful, and people who are actually in a very challenging neurological condition who say that their life can be quite altered from taking CGP Max. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it keeps us. It is really inspirational, actually.
Yeah. So does it have any side effects as well? Because I know that every medicine has kind of side effects. So does it have any side effects also?
We haven't come across any yet. So we've been keeping a log of customer feedback since we launched the product 2.5 years ago. We've had the odd complaint around a few minor things, but whether that was related or not is to be seen. We completed a clinical trial recently, and there were no adverse events reported at all in that study. So, so far we're very confident that there is no side effect profile, but of course, more studies are always needed.
Yeah, there's one question here from the Mr. Henry. He says, so many people have their neurons connected around 20th century mindset that no longer works. It's either wrong or irrelevant. What's the best way to fix that issue?
Well, we can always learn new things, I guess. I'm not exactly sure what the 20th century mindset is, but we are all have the amazing and huge ability to learn new things. So if you're not happy with your mindset, you learn a new way.
Yes, I think the brain capacity, the neuroplasticity. I love this capability of our human brain. No matter what is the age, you always have the power to rewire your brain and create a new whatever. Like if the mindset or whatever you want, you can create it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and that's a combination of strengthening connections and growing new connections between neurons. But also not recently, I guess 15, 20 years ago, something like that, it was then now been discovered that our adult brains contain neuronal stem cells, which can be spurred on to grow into new neurons when and if needed. So that's pretty interesting too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I know that like now this AI coming, technology coming, what do you see the future of like neurosciences or maybe like in these kind of medicines developing either faster or maybe it's going to slow down or it's going to help or it's going to, I don't know. What's your view on that? That what is the future of it now?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, I wonder if Ambreen will ask me my thoughts on AI. I I guess I'm somewhat of an observer and a fairly low to medium user of AI tools. I'm not at the forefront of AI, to be honest. But machine learning, wow,
Yes.
that is unto itself just such an amazing concept to me. And that I love it. I'm watching with great interest to see how machine learning comes along and how much does it replicate a
Yeah.
brain's thought process, and will we ever get to a level where machine learning can do what a human brain does? Our brains are very, very, very good at detecting small changes and subtle cues, whereas I'm not sure, well, who knows whether AI will ever be able to do that. I saw something pop up on my newsfeed today, actually, around the use of ChatGTP. So, high school students are using ChatGTP to write their essays all the time. It's a big problem, right? Because they're using their brains in a different way, right?
Yeah.
But actually now teachers have come out and said that ChatGTP essays are not as good as student essays. So I
Yeah.
find that really interesting. So at this point in time, that particular tool is not as good as the human brain at writing.
Yeah,
That
but
gives me,
but as you said that nowadays like younger generation is more prone to use more of AI rather than their own brains. But I think that's another thing that we need to learn. It's that they are using brains in maybe better way. That how to use ChatGPT or maybe using their brain uh, to think more in advanced ways. So let's see. I know that this is a vast topic itself, and if we want to start going into that direction, we need to
mm,
find out more. That okay, how is it working? How it's gonna damage the brain or it's enhance the brain? So yeah, that's another debate. But yes, I think we are optimists, and we see that I think with the help of all AI and technology, we will be able to at least address all these brain related issues, health related issues in a better way. And yeah, I think there's a very good comment here by Mr. Cooper that I still think that machine learning is a way behind uploading human mind into program. Kind of, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, the human mind is amazing, amazing. You even just think about language. But I only speak one language, right? So that's not very hard. Lots of clever people can speak lots of languages, but gosh, the English language is difficult. We have three versions of
Yeah.
nighttime and night. Yeah, so that that's that seems like that's a lot to learn, I think. And then people who are bilingual or trilingual, wow, then
Yeah.
yeah, and we know that people who are bilingual actually have bigger brain volume than people who can only speak one language.
Yeah, yeah. I speak actually I've learned five languages, so I'm like or at least like my native language is Urdu, then in English is like I've learned, I'm really proficient. And I'm living in Saudi Arabia, so I know basic of Arabic, and I've learned French and Spanish as well. So I know that this I wanted to learn all these languages because it's so fascinating that when you are learning another language, it it changes everything literally. I
Mm,
mean, the way of expression is not linked with the grammar or logic, because especially like I learned it, and especially when I'm teaching my kids, they ask those questions, especially about my like native language, because they are not as like grown up with this language. So they ask that how is it simply this is just the expression, you don't need this reasoning behind it. But I think our brain kind of learns that way, this is how we communicate this feeling or expression. And it's so fascinating, this when you actually start learning the different languages. I love that, this model, that how it gives us insight that how our mind works completely changes. It adopts the same thing in a different model, and then it starts to communicate. So yeah, this is quite fascinating. So I want to ask one thing, that do you want to what are the myths associated with maybe like the dementia or these kind of brain related issues? I wouldn't call it disorders, because I think that this kind of degenerative disorders. So what do you think? What are these myths associated with this? Well, like if our audience get to know this, they know that they shouldn't be following that myth instead of following the proper science behind it.
The myths. Yeah, I think there's one, the myth that it's sort of almost inevitable that a certain percentage of us will develop dementia. That is a myth. There is a lot you can do to reduce your risk of developing dementia. 45% of your risk is modifiable risk factors, at least.
Wow.
So to me, that's a myth, and it really comes back to looking after yourself. Things as simple as, sleep. We know that inadequate sleep is linked to higher rates of Alzheimer's disease later in life, and that's because you don't have a chance to clear out the cellular garbage. We talked about that. When you sleep, your brain gets rid of a whole lot of buildup and stuff that is basically the trash. So yeah, the myth is that it's inevitable that things are going to go downhill. Actually, that's not true. Learn a language, get out for a walk, hug a friend.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can do, and that's the message I really want to talk about with you.
Oh, I think that's a big, big message that people need to know, that, especially when it comes to brain, as Mr. Henry also asked, that, how they can change the mindset or something. I think one biggest thing is that being human, what fascinates me, and that's why I'm so much interested in neurosciences also, that we have the ability to cure ourselves. And that's something that, we can do it. A lot is in our hand, as you mentioned, that 45%
Yeah.
uh, of the, if we can reduce that risk factor, 45% by 45%, if we just modify our lifestyles, we can just modify. And the more we can do is when we actually keep modifying our mindsets and about minds, and when we know more about ourselves, as I said in the beginning, that it is very fascinating that our brain is regulating all those functions without us being aware of it. So that means that the function, it really knows how to do it. And sometimes when it loses the track, we need to be in charge, that we actually manage the flow very intentionally. So I think we can do it, and I think that's why I'm so much fascinated by this neuroplasticity, because I think we have the control and we can do it.
And the thing that gives me hope as well, in addition to these sort of modifiable risk factors that we're knowing more and more about them all the time, I'm just given great hope around the pace of advances. If you just think, if I think back to my undergraduate degree of what was known then and what's known now, it is massive, right? And that pace is just picking up all the time. So now with dementia, we know that there's one FDA-approved drug.
Yeah.
It's not very effective, but at least there is one. I saw a headline the other day that there's a vaccine in development for Alzheimer's. Oh, and also just a couple of weeks ago, the FDA approved the first blood test to detect Alzheimer's, which is a massive breakthrough. So that detects the ratio of the tau protein to the amyloid protein, and tau and amyloid are the plaques and tangled proteins that build up in the brain with Alzheimer's. So that blood test is for people who are over the age of 55 and already starting to display the signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's. But and so that's amazing, right? Because it gives obviously not what you would want to hear when you're at the age of 55, but it gives you the
Yeah.
power to jump in there and alter your lifestyle as much as possible. And so the hope for me, I hope that there will be a blood test that can go back even further to a younger age, say 45 or 40, where the very, very early stages of brain changes could be detected and people could take extreme sort of lifestyle measures to, help themselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot happening, and it just gives me a huge amount of confidence, that pace of change. I love to see it, and I keep a pretty close eye on it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know we can talk about it on and on, but I think our show is the time of our show is limited. So before we close the show, what one piece of advice would you like to give to our audience today to maintain, a better brain health?
Gosh, it's hard to narrow it down to one piece of advice, but if I could say out of all of those things, the modifiable risk factors, I think
Yeah.
just get out there and do some exercise and make it a priority every single day, because that's not only good for your future brain health, that's also good for your body and your immediate mental health. So it's just a win, 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 win all around.
Yeah, I think yes, this is really good that you know that how our mind and body are connected. When we move, it affects our brain as well. So I think yes,
Mm,
I think get your body moving and
yeah.
go out in nature. I think nature is a big healer too. I love that, just to spend some time, sit under the tree, listen to the birds chirping,
Mm,
and it really enhances your mood immediately. I mean, no matter
mm,
what is the mood or what is the state you're in, it enhances. So, yes,
mm.
definitely. Such a powerful advice. Yeah. And what is the best way to actually connect to you or to reach out to you?
Oh, probably via my LinkedIn. So I'd love to hear from any listeners who want to connect and have a chat about neuroscience or brain health. So
Yeah.
you can look me up on LinkedIn there. We've also got a dedicated website for the science of
Oh,
CGP, which is cgp-health.com. And
oh.
we've also got a website for our supplement brand, which is cgpmax.com.
Oh, I think you need to share these website link with me so I can post it in the comments and people can actually connect with those website as well. Also, I will also share this when I'll post on the our podcast episode so people will know that how to connect with you. So, anyways, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing such wonderful insights, especially about how to maintain the brain health and how we can actually avoid all those risk factors to prevent our brain health as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
It has been my absolute pleasure, Amberine. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thanks to all the audience that who actually joined in during a live session, and even those who are actually listening at the recording. So thank you so much for joining and listening to us. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.